Okay, we're at the machine and I have a full bobbin of white thread down below. I put white thread up in the top of my machine and I'm using my monster hoop. This is a 9.5 by 14 inch hoop. I need this large hoop because I'm going to be doing the inner border designs for the length of this quilt and as well for the top and the bottom parts. And in that case, I'm going to be using the 14-inch designs. So because of that, I want to use my 9.5 by 14-inch hoop to maximize the amount of stitching that I can do in one hooping. All right. I've also pressed my fabric. Look at this pretty white glitter fabric. I've pressed it to get the creases out of it. And if you remember, I mentioned it needed to measure approximately 58 inches long. So I've sewn the two pieces of fabric together with a 1/4 inch seam. Got that there, so the piece is now continuous. Then I also fused the back with the Reusable, so it can now help support the cotton when it does all that stitching. So I have 2 strips that are at least 58 inches long. That's going to be for the 2 sides of the quilt. So I'm going to put that aside for a second. Okay, so I also have 2 pieces of fabric that measure at least 18 inches or a little bit longer, and I've fused the back of this as well to help support the stitches. And this is for the top of the quilt and the bottom of the quilt. All right. And in this case, for these 2 strips, I'm going to be using a 7-inch design and a 10-inch design. And I've decided I'm going to use the 10-inch design first. Then I'll use the 7-inch design on the end. And that will give me what I need for the top of the quilt and the bottom of the quilt. Okay. So now, again, I've got white bobbin down below, white thread up on top. Let's go to the screen cam and let's load the designs. Okay, so I have a Baby Lock Destiny machine that is similar to the Brother Dream machine. It's almost identical. So if you have something similar, you can follow along. We're going to go to Embroidery. I'm going to go to my flash drive because I keep all my files on the flash drive. I'm going to go to Pumpkins and Potions. I'm going to go to the Quilting Designs. And now I'm going to go to the Halloween 4 Border folder because we're working on borders. Here are the 1-inch designs, and the first one I want to bring in is the 14-inch. Okay, because remember we talked about if I use the 14-inch on my 9.5 by 14-inch hoop, I will have 4 hoopings to get these inner borders done. Okay, if you don't have a 9.5 by 14-inch hoop, that's okay. You can actually pull in a 7-inch design, use your 5 by 7 hoop, and you will have 8 hoopings. Not a problem. You can do that. All right, so let's click Set. Now, because I've got a large hoop, I want to put multiple files on this one hooping. So I want to put my stylus on that design, and I want to drag it over to the left. That looks good. Okay, then I'm going to click Add, because now I want to add a second border file to this hoop. Now if you can't add, that's okay. What you'll end up doing is you'll be hooping each block by itself. It takes a little bit more stabilizer to do that, but you can totally stitch these out individually. All right, so I'm going to click Set on this one. It brought it in. It is the exact same file as we brought in before, and I'm going to just move it over here right about there. So I'm leaving a gap in between so I have room to trim the batting. Not a problem. I can easily fit 4 across. Okay, so we have 2 designs that are 14 inches long. I'm going to go back and I'm going to add, go back to the flash drive, oops, Pumpkins and Potions, Quilting, and now Border 4. Now I want to pull in a smaller design. The 14 inches are for the left and right side of the project. Then remember I said I was going to use a 10-inch and a 7-inch for the top and the bottom. We're going to use one of each for the top border and one of each for the bottom border, but I can stitch 2 of this at the same time. So I decided I want the Happy Haunting, Take at Your Own Risk to be in the upper left corner of my quilt to go across. So this is the 10-inch design. I'm going to load this first. Click Set, drag it with my stylus, bring it up here, give it a little bit of room in between, and click Add. And we're going to bring in a second copy of that 10-inch design. Quilting Designs, border 3, and the 10-inch. All right. Click Set. It brings it in the center, and I'm going to grab it, and I'm going to bring it over here. And I can grab this one and bring this one over a little bit. Grab this one and bring this one over a little bit. There we go. So I kind of have equal distance spacing between them. So these 2 are the 14-inch, these 2 are the 10-inch. After this hooping, after we stitched all this out, we're going to bring in the designs again for a second hooping, and during that stitch out, we will switch the 10-inch design for the 7-inch design. So what we're basically doing is we're starting the top and the bottom of the quilt. We're going to go across with the 10-inch, and then in the future, we will add the 7-inch to the bottom. And it's a different phrase, different saying. Okay, on these 14 inches, we're going to keep adding more 14 inches to each one of these 2 at the end of that strip. So you are making one continuous strip. Does that make sense? So it's pretty cool that we could add multiple designs to the machine and save some stabilizer that way. So now I'm going to click Embroidery. Now it just checked my hoop and it fit because my hoop is a 9.5 by 14 inch, and the way I placed it, it's taking up 8.39 this way and 13.31 this way. So it totally fits within my 9.5 by 14 inch hoop. If the machine gave you an error and it said switch to a larger hoop, then you need to move your design from the top or the bottom. Make sure you kind of center it so that it will fit between that 9.5 and 14. It should fit. Okay, but if it gives you an error, that just means one of these, either the top or the bottom or the left or the right, is outside of that 14 inch. Just grab it and move it in until you see it go under 14 inches and under 9 inches, and then you'll fit just fine. Isn't that cool? There's one more thing that I want to do. I want to change the order of the stitch out on this screen. Because right now it's going to start with the first one, and it's going to do every single step for the first one, and then start the second one. I don't want to do that because I'll end up switching threads a lot. So I want to click Edit, and I want to click this button right here that has multiple colors of threads, and then that button will go dark. Click Edit again, and now it's magically changed this. So it's going to stitch the placement stitch for each one of these first. Then we'll tack down the batting of each one of these in order, and then the fabric, etc. So we're going to be hopping from one to another without having to constantly switch our threads. So this is the way we want to stitch it out. Okay, so let's go to the hoop cam. Okay, so now I've got everything loaded. I have a piece of the poly no-show mesh stabilizer in my 9.5 by 14 inch hoop, and we are ready to start stitching. So it's going to now stitch the placement line for the batting for all 4 of those strips. All right, you ready? Let's put the foot down and let's stitch this out. Here we go. Okay, so now you noticed that it stitched all 4 of these out without stopping in between. So now when we place the batting down in this first one, after it's tacked down the batting, we're going to have to stop the machine before it starts stitching the second one in order to place the batting and to do the second one. So now just remember, you have to stop the machine before it starts each piece, okay? Okay, so I've got my stack of pre-cut batting out, and I am going to be pulling the 14-inch ones for this hoop. I'm going to pull out a 14 and a 14, and then I'm going to put those aside. And then I'm going to pull out the 2 10-inch, which are going to be for the right side. And I'm going to put the 7 inches to the one side. Okay? I like to do this one at a time, so I don't literally have to tape anything. I'm just going to place the batting down, making sure that I have all sides covered. And then I'm going to use my stylist to hold it down. Okay, so let's put the foot down and let's tack down this batting. Okay, see, I stopped the machine before it started the second one. My strips of batting are a teeny bit bigger. I had some pre-cut at 2 inches, so I used those. That's why I have a little bit more extra than what you'll have. Okay, so now I'm going to take the second strip and do the same thing with it. I'm going to place it down. I'm going to actually lift the foot up so it doesn't start stitching when I'm down here. Make sure I've got everybody covered. Now put the foot down and let's tack this piece of batting down. Again, stopping the machine before we get to that third strip. Here we go. Okay, same thing. I stopped the machine. Now I'm going to grab one of the 10-inch strips, put my foot up so it doesn't stitch on me when I'm underneath it accidentally. Okay, so make sure I've got everybody where it needs to be. Put the foot down and let's tack down this third strip, again stopping the machine before we start stitching that fourth one. All right, here we go. Okay, so I stopped the machine, lift my foot up, and now I'm going to place the fourth piece of batting down, doing the same thing. It's covering all that stitch line. Put the foot down and let's tack down this fourth piece of batting. The machine will automatically stop when it's done with this strip. Okay, so now I want you to take the hoop off of the machine. All right, and then I want you to take this over to a table, and now I want you to trim away the excess batting on the sides and the top and the bottom of all of these strips. Okay, so basically trim around that stitch line, get rid of the excess batting, and try not to nick the stitch line. You want to keep the batting intact and sewn down. And I'll meet you right back here when you have that done. Okay, so now that we have all four of those strips trimmed up here, now let's stitch the placement line for the fabric. So foot down, leave white thread still up in the top of your machine, and let's stitch these out. It can go continuous. You don't need to stop it in between at this point. This is a placement line. Okay, so that's great. So now I'm going to get my first piece of fabric, which is one of these long pieces that I've sewn together with the smaller piece so that it measures at least 58 inches in length. Okay, so I'm going to put this down, and I want it to give it at least a 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch up on top. That'll give you room to trim it if you need to, and also allow for your 1/4 inch seam allowance before the design starts. Make sure that you've got all that placement line thoroughly covered on both sides, and we're good to go. So I'm going to put the foot down, which I already did, to see where it placed, and now I'm going to start stitching. I'm going to use my stylus to hold it down as it tacks this down. I am then going to stop the machine before it starts to do this one because I have to lay the fabric down there. Okay? You got this. Let's tack down this fabric. Okay, so I stopped the machine and I'm going to put my foot up so it doesn't stitch. You notice when it tacked it down, it didn't go across. That's leaving the opening, especially down here on the bottom area, so that it can be continuous and not look like it's multiple blocks stitched together. So what I did was, when it came down here and then it turned around and it came back up here, I just kind of used my stylus to make sure that the fabric was flat behind, from my view, or actually in front of where it was stitching. And I kept that fabric down nice and flat. Okay, so now you got all this fabric left over from this first strip. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to roll it up because I don't want to have to repress it. So I'm just going to give it a very easy roll, because I don't want this literally draping on the floor as it's stitching. So I'm basically rolling it up. Kind of see it. It's a little hard to see off camera. And now I'm going to position this down at the bottom of my hoop so that it's out of the way as it stitches. Let me show you that real quick. I'm going to take my hoop off. There we go. So it's just rolled up here. It's not in the way of any stitching coming down here, but it's also not going to dangle off the end of the hoop. Okay, so I'll put my hoop back on the machine. This is a big hoop, so I got to scoot way back to do that. Okay, so now we're ready for the second long strip. This is also one that measures at least 58 inches long. And then I've sewn together those two pieces to make it at least 58 inches long. We're going to do the same thing to here. Give me the extra up there. And now I'm going to go position myself on both sides of that placement line and then give myself at least a 1/2 inch above the top. And then line it down. Press it with my hand there. Make it flat, and let's put the foot down, and it's going to do the same thing. It's going to stitch the two sides of this fabric. Here we go. You notice I've got my stylus now behind the foot or in the direction of where it's going to sew, and I'm just going to help keep that fabric pressed down in front of that needle so that the fabric can't bunch up. and stop the machine. Okay. Okay, now I'm going to very gently roll this fabric up, just so it doesn't crease, because I don't want to have to press it again. Just so it has a gentle roll to keep it out of the way. There we go. Doesn't have to be pretty looking, it just has to keep it off the floor. Okay, so now that one's down at the bottom of the hoop. Now we're going to grab the shorter top fabric pieces. Grab one of those, as I grab two. Grab one of those. Now we're going to do the same thing with this, except these are the two shorter pieces which we're using for the top of the quilt. I put my foot up so it doesn't accidentally stitch on me. And I line it up. I want it to be at least a ½ inch above that top line, which is where the foot is showing it's going to be. That's what I want, ½ inch. Okay, let's tack down this fabric. Here we go. You got this. And stop the machine. Put the foot up. Now I've got the fourth piece of fabric, which is also for the top and the bottom. So it's a shorter piece. And we're going to do the exact same thing we just did. Place that fabric within that placement stitch and move it up so I have about a ½ inch cushion up on top. And move it over just a little bit, and let's tack down this fabric. You're almost done with this step. That fabric is so pretty. This is my favorite fabric. It is a white glitter fabric. And I just love how that shines. Just so sparkly. Okay, so I have the two long ones rolled up. And I don't really need to roll up these shorter ones because they're so short they're not going to hit the floor. They're just going to dangle off the end of the hoop. So that is fine. So now, my favorite part of this whole process is deciding what color thread that you're going to do this quilting in. And my favorite part of this whole project that has been exciting me the whole way is I wanted to use a variegated thread in this project. And really with the other blocks that we did, it was very difficult to incorporate the variegated thread in with what we were doing. This to me is the perfect idea for using variegated thread. I'm using a white background because this to me is my inner border. My outside border is probably going to be black with orange thread, I'm thinking, to pull in the orange of the project. But this was my opportunity to experiment by making an inner border, making it white, which also ties the white in with the quilt, but then incorporating a variegated thread that has the black, the orange, and the purple color in it. That will kind of, I'm hoping, unify the whole quilt and make an amazing inside border. This thread is by Threadart. See if you can see it there. It is color number 20, and I'll put a link in the description below to Threadart where you can get this thread. Usually this time of year it's a little hard to get. I was able to purchase it last year, and I've had it in my collection with all of their other variegated thread. They have a set. Just waiting for the right opportunity to use it, and I think this is it. So you now need to choose what color thread you want to quilt these inner borders with and put that color thread in the top of your machine. I forgot to mention that the variegated thread is a polyester thread. I tend to use polyester in all of my machine embroidery because it will hold up better and stand the test of time than what the really pretty rayons will. But this, I think, is going to be amazing using this variegated thread, and I'm really excited to get started. So if you're ready, we're going to start quilting each section it's saying is about a 3-minute stitch out. I don't need to stop it in between unless it gets caught on fabric or something. It should be fine just quilting one strip at a time. All right, so let's put the hoop back on. And we are ready to go. Are you ready? I am excited to see the stitch out. So here we go. Enjoy. That is amazing. I love the way that the variegated thread came out. That is cool. And the way that they digitized it, where you go down and do half the letters and come back and do the other half, you can have orange on the bottom of one letter and then purple on the top or black on the top. So it even makes the variegated thread pop even more because you've got the potential for 2 colors on each letter, not just one. That is so cool. Love it. So I hope that you love the way yours came out. So now the next thing we need to do is we need to take these out of the hoop. Okay, so let's do that first. Okay, so we've got it out of the hoop. That's so cool. Okay, now what we're going to do is get the 2 long strips from these 2 out of the way. And I'm going to deal with the 2 smaller strips first. What I want to do is I want to trim away the excess stabilizer. But I don't want to trim the strips. Okay, so leave these strips out of your way, trim around, and cut away the excess stabilizer on these 2. And then, with those out of the way, then you can tackle the ones with the longer strips. Same thing. Don't trim the fabric. Don't trim your excess fabric. Just trim the excess stabilizer. The borders, when we get all done, we'll trim up to the correct size. So I don't want you to trim any of the fabric or any of that. Just the stabilizer. Okay, and then I'll meet you right back here. Okay, I've cut just the first 2 smaller strips, and this is what you should have left over. It doesn't have to be pretty. All right, I didn't want to trim too close to the fabric, so just trim away right up to the fabric. And this, in the end, when we are trimming these blocks to the correct size, all that will be trimmed away. You just want to get the bulk of it out so you can maneuver it in the next stage. Okay, so this is what you want the strips to look like. Okay, now I'm going to keep working on the larger strips. Now I have the 2 longer strips cut as well, just the bulk of the stabilizer off the ends on the sides. All right, so now I'm going to put these aside, and then I want you to put another piece of the polynomial mesh stabilizer back in your 9.5 by 14 hoop, or if you're 5 by 7 hoop, if you're doing 7-inch strips. Go ahead and reload your hoop with that polynomial mesh stabilizer, and we'll get ready to stitch the next section. I love this. This is so pretty. Okay, so now that we're finished embroidering, we're going to click OK. Okay, and I'm going to load white thread in the top of my machine, and I've got white bobbin down below. Okay, so now we need to change this up. We're done stitching out these 10-inch. So I don't want those anymore. So I'm going to click OK. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to home and we're going to clear the memory, and then we're going to load the next section. It's easier just to reload from the beginning. All right, so I'm going to delete the selected pattern. I'm going to click yes. Go back to embroidery, back to my flash drive, back to pumpkins and potions and the quilting. And then go to border Halloween 4, and I'm going to bring in the 14-inch again. Click set. I'm going to bring this over to the left. Click add. Go back to the flash drive and get that 14-inch file again. It's thinking. Quilting designs. Border 4. Pull the 14-inch in again. Okay, click set. Move that over to the left. Just a little bit. Okay, click add. Now when I go back to that folder, I'm going to be looking for the 7-inch designs. We did the 10. Now I need the 7. That will make the top and the bottom strips in this project approximately 17-18 inches, which is what we want. So I'm going to click set. It brought it in. I'm going to go all the way up. That looks good, and I'm going to bring it in one more time. Same subfolders. Halloween border 4. Bring in the 7-inch again. And it brought it in the center, and then I grab it and I bring it up over there. And I can see here I am under 9 inches and I am under 14. Actually under 9.5 inches and under 14. So it's going to fit perfectly. All right. So this is what we're going to stitch out in the second hooping. In the third hooping, we're not going to have anything for the top and bottom, because after this hooping, the top and bottom strips of this inner border will be done. So let's click embroidery, and it liked it. It's within the size of my hoop. Okay, so the last thing that we need to do before we can start stitching out the placement lines is to change the order of the threads here, how it's going to stitch out. We don't want it to do each one in its entirety. We want to edit, and we want to hit this thread button. Once it goes dark, you click edit again, and it sorts the thread in the order. So it'll do the placement line for this one, then it'll jump and do placement line for this one, that one, and that one. And that's the order we want to do it. All right. So now we are ready to start stitching this out. I loaded white thread up on the top of my machine, and I still have a bobbin with a good amount of white thread down below. So let's put the foot down, and we're going to stitch out the placement line for the batting. And you don't have to stop it in between. Just let it stitch all 4 placement lines out. Here we go. Okay, so now I'm going to get 2 strips of the 14-inch long batting that I pre-cut and put one aside, and then I'm going to lay this down just like we did on the first set, and we're going to cover that placement line all the way up and down. Once you've got it in place, put the foot down, and let's tack down this batting. You got this. Okay, then stop your machine. Okay, put the foot up so it doesn't stitch on your fingers accidentally. And I'm going to lay the next piece of batting down, making sure that I cover all that placement line. Put the foot down, and let's tack down this batting. Okay, stop your machine, put the foot up, get one of the two smaller pieces of batting that you have that measures approximately 7 inches. Put that batting down, make sure you got all lines covered. Put the foot down, and let's tack down this batting. You got this. Stop your machine, put the foot up, and then place your last piece of the small batting right down on top, foot down, and let's tack down this batting. Okay, so now you know what you're going to do next, right? You're going to take the hoop off the machine, and you're going to take this to a table, and I want you to trim away all of the excess batting on all 4 sides of each of those tack down lines. All right, get rid of that excess batting, and I'll meet you right back here. So now that we have all the excess batting trimmed away, now we can put our foot down and stitch out the placement line. I don't need to stop it in between each one. I can let it stitch one right after the other. You ready? Here we go. White thread still up on top. Okay, so now we are going to take the hoop off the machine. Okay, and I would recommend taking this over to a table. I'm going to do it right here so that you can see it, but on a table it would be a little bit easier to line this up and to work with this large of a hoop. I am going to get out some embroidery tape. We're going to use that. And then if you can imagine what this strip is going to do. This is the finished piece or section that we stitched out in the last section. And now we want this to continue on. So the easiest way to do this is to put your finished section down and fold the next section up on top of it. So it exposes this edge. And mind you, this is the finished section. I'm basically getting this strip out of the way. So I'm going to easily line this up on this part up here, so then I can put the fabric down and stitch out the next section. And it will line up continuously with what we've already done. So basically I'm doing this, all right? But I'm doing this so that I can line up where the last section ended, and I'm going to line that up with where this section starts. Does that make sense? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a piece of embroidery tape, and I'm going to roll it so it's inside out and the sticky is on the outside part. Okay, burning my arms here. I'm going to put this sticky down on the stabilizer, but don't push too hard yet. It's going to be kind of hard. Let me move this down a little bit so you can see. So now I want to line this strip up so that the fabric is going to be totally covering that placement line, and the batting is right up against this strip where the other piece of batting is. Okay, so then I'm going to very carefully keep my finger on that tape, and I'm going to put this fabric down. And if you feel right here, you can feel that the batting is up against one another. Okay, then what I like to do is I like to put a little bit of embroidery tape on top as well. So it's got two things holding it down. It's got the rolled up tape underneath, and it's got tape on the top. Does that make sense? Then I can literally put this fabric down, and I'll take another piece of embroidery tape just to put this in its place, because I have to move the hoop now, and I'll show you in a second what I did. I put another piece of tape down here. The only reason I do this on this time is because I got to move the hoop back into position and put it on the machine, and I don't want this strip to move because it's perfectly lined up. This, I can feel batting, but they're right up against each other, so it'll be like one continual piece. Then I can go ahead and put the hoop back on the machine. Alright, and now I'm going to move this to where it belongs. I moved my machine out of the way just so I could show you that, but this is where your machine is going to be. Okay, so now I want white thread still on the top of the machine because it's now going to tack down this strip of fabric. Then I want to stop the machine before it gets to this part right there. Alright, so white thread still up in the top. Here we go. Let's tack this down. Okay, so I stopped the machine. I'm going to put my foot up. All right. Now we're going to take the hoop off and do the exact same thing that we did with the first strip. Okay. I'm going to get my second very long strip. Pardon the camera there as I boop it. And I'm going to fold it over. I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to take my embroidery tape. Get myself a piece. Roll it inside out. Put it right here on the top. Then I've got my folded over section. Just like that. I'm going to bring it down. And I want to make sure that everything is going to mesh up against that batting, and that the fabric will completely cover that stitch line. Okay, can you see that? Yeah, you can. Okay, so then, holding my finger in place on top of that tape, I'm going to move this long strip down here, and I'm going to feel for the batting. I can feel the seam. They're nested right up against each other. That's perfect. Okay, so now I'm going to tape it down just to keep it from moving until it gets tacked down. All right, and now I've got the fabric lined up here. I'm going to tape it again a little bit further down here, just so that it keeps the strip in place until I can get the hoop back on the machine. Oops. And then I gotta watch because it's gonna get caught under my needle. I don't want that either. All right. It's a dance. It's like keep it from getting caught under the needle, keep the stabilizer out of the way, and don't tragically move the fabric. All right, we're good. So let's go ahead and let's tack down this piece of fabric. You got this. Okay, then I stop the machine and I'm going to roll up the ends of these two long ones just to keep them off of me. They're not on the floor, but I just don't want them to get all snarl up on me. All right, so we're going to do the same thing. Foot up. Now we're going to go get one of the smaller sections that we did, which is for the top and the bottom of the quilt. So we got this one here, right there. We're going to do the same thing. Take the hoop off. All right. Here is the 10-inch one that I did in the last section. I'm going to fold it up just like I did. Okay. And what am I going to do? I'm going to get a piece of embroidery tape, because I want to be able to keep this down as well in position. You can use this pink tape, or you can use the Kimberbell paper tape, whichever embroidery tape that you have handy. There you go. And I've got this folded at the end. Come in here, tilt it, making sure that the fabric is going to cover that placement line and that the batting is going to be right up against that other piece that's in the strip. You got that? All right, so now, don't move, anybody. Don't move. I'm going to tape that down. Okay. There we go. So that's not going to move. And this is a very short strip, so I'm really not worried too much about it going anywhere, but I'll take two small pieces just to tack it down. There we go. All right. Awesome. Okay. So now make sure those don't get stuck on your needle. Put the hoop back on the machine. We're good. All right, you got this. So now we're going to tack this down. And don't worry if the tape gets caught in the stitches. This tape is embroidery tape, so it's literally meant to rip away and not affect those stitches. Okay, so let's put the foot down and let's tack down this fabric. Here we go. And then stop your machine. Okay, we've only got one more left to do. You've got this. This is a little bit of work to do, but the fact that it gives you a continuous border without any seams is really amazing. Otherwise, you'd have to have a hoop that was like, 58 inches long, which is not practical. So now I'm going to get the last piece that we did, which is for the top and or bottom of the quilt. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to flip it up, get a piece of tape, roll it inside out so it sticks right on top. Make sure I've got that straight. Then I'm going to angle it, making sure that that fabric is going to cover the stitch line. And then I want to make the batting nest up against the other batting. So it's like a batting sandwich. Really cool, right? Totally cool. Nobody move. Okay. And then I'm going to tape this down. If I wasn't moving the hoop back on the machine, I could probably just hold it down, but because I'm moving it, I don't want to have to reposition anything. Okay, it clears the needle, goes back on the hoop, Oh, I forgot to tape it up on top. I want this taped down. There we go. Let me feel the batting. Yep, it's still lined up. Okay, we're good. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's stitch this fabric down. You got this. Very cool. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to take off the tape that's down here on the bottom section because I don't need it anymore because the fabric has been tacked down. There we go. See, it just tears away cleanly. Doesn't leave anything behind. And I'm going to put these pieces aside because I can actually use a lot of these over again. Usually I can get like 4 or 5 uses out of the tape before it doesn't stick anymore. So I'll just put these on the end of my table so I can reuse them. Alright, so now I want to put my variegated thread up on the top of the machine. Because now we're going to do my favorite part, which is the quilting. So put whatever color thread that you embroidered the quilting in the first section, put that color thread in the top of your machine, and we get to do the quilting. Okay. And it looks like each section is 3 minutes or less. These two are going to be less, but each one of these is about 3 minutes in real life. All right, so let's put the foot down and let's quilt this out. Here we go. All right, that is amazing. All right, so now what I want you to do is I want you to take the hoop off the machine, and I want you to take this over to a table. I want you to take off all the tape that you have holding these down, and then I want you to trim away the excess stabilizer only. Do not trim the fabric strips. Don't touch anything with the fabric. Just trim away the excess stabilizer, and then we'll get ready to hoop the third hooping, which will just be the 2 larger strips. All right, I'll meet you right back here. All right, look at these. Isn't that amazing? Look at what you've done on the large strips and just 2 hoopings. Look at that. Isn't that amazing? That's approximately a little bit less than probably 28 inches. 14.14 is 28, allowing for the start and stop. You're looking at least a good 26, 27 inches of stitching. Look at that. Oh, amazing. Okay, so we have 2 of those done. So put those off to one side. And then we have the 2 smaller versions, which if you look at this is the 10-inch to here, and then the 7-inch. And what's amazing with this is you will never be able to tell in the quilt where you started and stopped. It's really cool how that's done. Just amazing.